Hi, Daren Lindley here, and I just wanted to share with you some good news. And the gospel is good news. And when I was growing up, I got to tell you, it did not necessarily feel like super good news. It felt like it's going to be really good if you're good. And if you're not good, then it's not going to be good at all. It's probably really bad news. And so I fell in love with Jesus, and if you've been watching any of these videos, you know my story, and I want to encourage you to go to our website. We're developing a big video log, so if you want to go back and catch up on any story. But in the last video, I shared how I fell in love with Jesus again after I'd been traveling and speaking for quite a while. And, honestly, what was going on in my life in those days was I was always feeling like a failure. So I'd go to a church, and you wouldn't have liked me in those days, to be honest with you. I was seriously a bad news preacher. I was telling people how they're going to go to hell, and it was just really ugly stuff. It's honestly hard for me to even rehearse the way I was in those days. And then one day I started realizing, you know what? I'm the biggest, fattest liar ever. And I tell people you should do this and do this and do this. And every time I would preach it, in my heart and mind, I'm saying, tonight I'm going to do that. I'm going to start doing it. And I meant it. I wanted to mean it, but I couldn't live it. I couldn't even come close to living all the stuff you're supposed to do as a Christian. And it was just killing me. And so finally I had this crisis, which I mentioned in the last video. And I just fell in love with Jesus again. And I just started cruising around loving Jesus. And the whole term good news came to my mind. And I thought, that's really what this is. The gospel is really, really good news. And then I realized, you know what? The gospel is actually too good to be true, but it actually is. And so here's the glorious mystery of the gospel. If you fall in love with Jesus, Jesus pours himself into you, and Jesus lives out through you. So you're not being a good guy. You are actually literally manifesting Jesus, and Jesus is pouring out of you. That makes you a whole different human being. And then I started seeing the scriptures that seem to contradict my whole life experience, where Jesus says this: my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Now, I don't know if being a Christian was easy for you. It was not easy for me. There was so much that I felt like I had to do, and I was always failing at it. In fact, I don't think Christianity was easy at all. I think it was very, very difficult. My version of it was very, very difficult. But you want to know the truth? Actually, it's impossible. Because Jesus says stuff like this: love your enemy. Man, do I love my enemies. I got to tell you, my enemies are the best. If you don't have an enemy like I've got, I got to tell you what, you've never experienced true enemies. Now, that sounds silly, doesn't it? Love your enemies? How do you love your enemies? Well, that's called impossible, right? But when Christ comes into you, he does the impossible in you. And it's not you doing what you want. Well, I'm going to love my enemy now. I'm going to really start trying to love my enemy. No, that's posing. That's acting like you love your enemies. Jesus wants us to actually, literally love our enemies. When Christ pours himself into you, he then starts loving through you. So the gospel actually is easy, not because it's doable, but because it's impossible. And if Christ doesn't do it in you, it never gets done. Nobody ever actually lives a Christian life unless Jesus pours himself through you. And so I like to say it this way: the gospel is easy because Jesus is doing it in you. It's not easy because it's doable. It's easy because it's impossible, but Christ in you does everything. And so I want to encourage you today. I pray you fall in love with Jesus, that you just love him and enjoy him and like him and taste and see that he is good. Because when you fall in love with Jesus, it'll change you. It'll change you. You just become a different person. His yoke is easy. Is your Christianity easy? Is his burden light, so light that it's uplifting? That's how light his burden is. You get lift with his burden. And hey, he loves you, and I pray that you have a wonderful day, and look forward to chatting with you soon.